To this webinar. My name is Rebecca Blackburn Hines, and I am a Special Grants Program Manager for the South Carolina Small Business Development Centers. And this webinar is a presentation of our Bridge program. Our Bridge program stands for Better Resources for Inclusion, Dialogue, Growth, and Equity. And today's webinar is on organizational, financial, and legal considerations for your business. A little bit about the Bridge. The Bridge is a collaboration between the SCSBDC and the South Carolina Commission on Minority Affairs, our South Carolina Historically Black Colleges and Universities, and other partners and lenders. The premise of the program is to improve upon the economic impact of African American businesses and entrepreneurs. This program has several components, as you'll see in this chart. We have customized consulting, a podcast that recently launched, a virtual student center that employs students from all of our HBCUs in South Carolina, and specialized educational training programs like the one that you will see today. And so I would like to introduce to you our USC Region Director, Paul Feathering-Gill, and he will tell you a little bit about today's presentation and introduce our featured guests. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and good morning, everyone. We're glad that you're here with us. And, one of the things that we know from our work as SBDC is that one of the biggest challenges that businesses face is, not just from the very beginning, but through their life of their business, making sure that they are properly organizing themselves, properly managing financial and legal issues. And so we know that there's a real need for that, for making sure that business owners stay on top of that. And it's really our pleasure to introduce today two speakers who are experts in these topics that can help you to make sure that your business is where it needs to be in terms of its organization and legal structure and financial issues. And so we have two experts today, Kim Raber, who is an attorney in Columbia, and Deltrice Hart, who is with D. Hart Accounting, also in Columbia. And I know they're going to introduce themselves and give you a little bit more about themselves as part of their presentation. So I would like to introduce Kim first to talk about organizational and legal issues. So thank you, Kim, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's just a pleasure to be here today. And I am going to, apologize first that technology is not my thing. So the organization's being wonderful to help share my screen and do this for me. But I'm an attorney in Columbia, South Carolina. I practice in the area of business law. I form and I'll tell you about fixing, but I form and fix a lot of LLCs and corporations. I handle contract law and also estate planning. So those are my main three areas. And I enjoy those because I find that my business clients need all of those services. And so it's nice to be able to have that relationship with the clients. So we can skip ahead about, 4 or 5 screens because they just list a little bit about what I do. I've been practicing law for 34 years. I'm from Greenwood, South Carolina, went to college at UNC at Chapel Hill and then law school here. So I always laugh and say I'm a Carolina fan, and probably just depends on the sport and the year as to which Carolina, but we've got it covered either way. So I want to talk to you, and we can skip ahead a little bit. I want to talk to you today about small business compliance and legal issues. And with that, we want to talk about all the things, and we can skip ahead again. I'm sorry. Keep going and going and going. So that's just telling about areas of practice. I enjoy being a guest speaker like today. And now we're in our small business compliance and legal issues part of it. And let's go to the next slide. We're going to use throughout this talk Donald Duck Plumbing, Inc. But don't worry, because I know most people have LLCs or plan to have LLCs for their businesses. And our discussion today is going to talk about both corporations and LLCs. So we're going to talk about Donald Duck Plumbing as either an LLC or or corporation, with Donald Duck being the owner. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to talk about why we want to form either a corporation or an LLC. And the first and foremost reason is to protect our personal assets from being subject to the debts and liabilities of a company. I always use the shield of armor when I'm talking to my clients. We want that shield of armor to be from our head to our toes. If you form your company yourself, because in South Carolina, you can form an LLC at home in your pajamas, 99.9% of the time, you're not going to have everything you need. And to have that protection, that shield of armor. And so we're going to talk about the other things that you need, because when you do it yourself, you're going to have your articles that you file with the Secretary of State. You're typically going to have your EIN number from the IRS. But we want to have more than that to make sure that the courts feel that we're a company and that we're entitled to the protection. And on the screen here, we have that McDonald's hot coffee case. Do we all remember that case? And it's just kind of an example that, you know, anybody can sue for anything at almost any time. And so we want to make sure that we are protected. We don't want to lose everything we own. We want to have our business protected behind a shield so they can't get through that shield of armor and get to our other assets. Next slide, please. The other reason to form a corporation or an LLC is you can save withholding taxes. And Deltrice is going to talk about that much more professionally than I would. And so I'm going to leave that topic to her to discuss taxes. So next slide, please. So we talked about if you form your corporation or LLC, you file your articles and you think that's all I need. And that's what a lot of people have. That's all they have. Next slide. It's certainly not all that you need. And we're going to talk about some other things that you do need with our next slide. So if you're an LLC, you need an operating agreement. For a corporation, on the next slide, it's called bylaws. Both of those are the rules and regulations of your company. It tells you how to hold meetings, what a majority vote is, how, if the company needs money, how you put that money in, how you take money out, how it's going to contain restrictions on sales and things of that nature, which we'll go into. But it is the rule book for your company. So each company needs either bylaws or an operating agreement, depending on whether they're an LLC or a corporation. Next slide is going to say we also need certificates. We're probably all familiar with stock certificates, but LLC should have certificates of ownership as well. They're called either member or unit certificates, and that signifies who owns an interest in the company and what interest they own. Do they own 100 units, 1,000 units? Are there two owners and each own 500 units? So that establishes ownership in the company. That's your proof that you are an owner. Next slide. We also need a transfer ledger. That's an alphabetical listing of the owners. And I know that seems silly. I get asked all the time, I'm a single member LLC. Do I have to really have that? My name's going to be in there. You do. It's just one of the minimum requirements to be considered a company. We want to be considered a company. That's the whole reason we formed it. If you're not considered a company, that's when the court can allow you to be sued personally. So we want to have these minimum level of documents to show that we are acting like a company. Next slide, please. We also want to have minutes of meetings. So we're going to have minutes when we start our company. We should have organizational minutes approving all the things that we did to form the company. But we're also going to need to maintain minutes of major transactions. You heard me say I fix a lot of companies. I do that by that's an old Southern term, right? Fix. I probably don't find it in the legal dictionary, but we do a lot of fixing. That is when the company either does not have all those formational documents we talked about. We do a lot where you come in with your EIN number and your articles, and then we prepare these other documents, your operating agreement, your unit certificates, your transfer ledger, your organizational minutes, and put those in a binder. So if you were sued and somebody asked, the other side's definitely going to ask for your documents, then you can show them this book and say, here you go. I am doing everything I'm supposed to do. I'm acting like a company and I deserve the protection of a company. But even though we do that, you may also have been in business for a while, or you're going to be in business for a while, and you need to also have minutes approving major transactions in your company. Major transactions are not dollar amounts, but it is when you sign a legal document is a good guide. So if you sign a lease for office space, if you buy a company car, if you buy a piece of property, if you lease equipment, either, earth moving equipment or a copier or a cash register or point of sale system, a trash contract, a garbage, contract for garbage removal, all of those, every time you're doing that, you're signing a legal document. And it's not voluminous. I know that scares everybody, but think about it. How many of those are you going to have? You might have a few in the beginning, but otherwise for client contracts, we want to approve those, but not every time you have a client sign your contract, we can just approve the form at the beginning. And then you are allowed to use that form and sign that form. So we just want to have a record. One of our cases in South Carolina, the court said that the company was not acting like a company because when it entered into a non-compete agreement, it didn't approve that agreement or say who had the authority to sign that agreement. And so the court would not enforce the agreement, not because the agreement was bad, but because the company wasn't a valid company and didn't therefore have authority. There was no legal entity the court considered to be even enter into the agreement. So that's what we don't want to happen. And that's why we want to approve anything that's legal in nature in which you've signed a legal document. Next slide, please. We also, every company should have a seal. It's just an embossing seal that has the name of your company, the state you were formed in, as well as the year that the company was formed. Contracts that go out of state often require the seal. Bank loan documents for companies often require the seal. You'll see those words, that word SEAL, and that's what that means. Next slide, please. Again, Deltrice is going to discuss this much more in depth, but one of the decisions you'll want to make as to whether it's important for your company to make the S election to be treated as an S corporation for tax purposes. Next slide. Your EIN number, most people get that themselves, but if we form your company, we do that for you. Next slide. Your state identification numbers, just like you have the EIN is a federal number. It's like a social security number for your business. South Carolina will also issue a state number for you. That's an ID number for your company. Next slide. This one, you're going to hate me for. So you do have to have city and or county business licenses in every place that you do business. So you certainly have to have it for where your company is, whether you're operating out of your home or you have an office, but where you list your designated place of business, this is where I'm physically at, you certainly have to have a license. If you're a plumber and you have your business license maybe in the city of Columbia, County of Richland, but you also perform plumbing services out of your company in Lexington County, or the town of Lexington or the city of Newberry or the county of Newberry, you will have to check with all those places to see if you also need a business license there. There's no uniformity right now with that. There's no reciprocity with that. Each city and each county can make their own rules with regard to whether they require a license. The fees are not the same. The timing of the fees is not necessarily the same. It is not an easy process. I have an elevator inspector client and he has to hold 42 business license. He carries them around in his truck in a binder. So I know that that is not exciting to hear, but it is something you want to check into. There can be severe fines. I have heard clients say that they were in a particular city and they had a license, but the employee that was there did not have it on him, and it was $1,000 fine. So it's something that you certainly don't want to take too many of those. And to make sure, if you think about it, vendors have to have licenses wherever there's a show like a harvest festival, and maybe somebody selling their jewelry or their artwork, they have to have a license, a business license where the show is. Food trucks have to do that. So just kind of think about your business, and it's just a good idea to go online or call the cities and counties involved and make sure. Next slide, please. So you would think, we've talked about a lot, right? You would think that's all you have to do, but believe it or not, there's more. So let's see what that is with the next slide. And next. So we talk about, the old saying is, if you want to be a duck, you have to walk like a duck, act like a duck, talk like a duck. Well, we have to do that with our companies. So let's talk about some ways that we need to do that. Next slide. So let's look at the sign on your building. And let's look at, we're using Donald Duck. So let's look at Donald's sign. Is his sign okay? Cute sign. So let's go to the next slide. His sign is not okay. The reason being, and if we go to the next slide, it's going to show us, when you choose a name at the Secretary of State's office, you have to choose an ending that's proper for your company. So if we click on, it's going to slowly get all of them, but it's INC or incorporated for a corporation, or CORP. They're going to keep on coming in, corporation spelled out, LLC, company, limited liability company, co. So you've picked one of these names. When you pick that name and you register your company at the Secretary of State, that is your name. That ending that we're seeing, the LLC, the corporation, the corp, the Inc., it becomes part of your name. You can't just lop that off. I see it all the time, and y'all probably do too. And this is probably the scary part of the talk, if I didn't scare you enough with the business licenses. But you see people with hats and shirts and business cards and pens and cups and umbrellas and everything that will have their logo on them. And this ending of the name is missing. When this ending is missing, it tells me as an attorney that you are not an entity. If you had Donald Duck Plumbing, like we just saw on his sign, and you didn't have his ending, like comma, INC period, Donald Duck Plumbing is a sole proprietorship. It's not an entity. You have to use the ending on the name to show that you are a company and that you're entitled to that protection. Remember that shield of armor? This is one of the things that you want to always use to make sure that you are protected. I know that people like branding and logos, and for some reason they don't like to include these endings in them. They don't have to be big. Remember the little R for trademarks and copyrights like you see on cereal boxes and different names? It's tiny. It can be tiny, but please put it in there. It's just something that, again, an attorney on the other side of you could use to say, I thought I was doing business with a sole proprietorship. That means if you're a sole proprietorship, you're not protected. They can sue you personally. And they're looking to sue you in every way they can. They don't want to be limited to what your entity has. They want to come after your house and your car and your bank accounts and your investments and maybe interest in other businesses. Next slide. So we, again, just to say it another way, we want to show to the world that we're an LLC or corporation. And by using our proper name with the ending on there is the way we do that. Next slide. So let's look at stationery. Not that everybody uses it anymore, but let's pretend. So we see Donald Duck Plumbing with his address and city, state. Looks good, except for one thing, right? Look at the name again. That's a sole proprietorship. That's not a company. And if we go through the next couple of slides, it's going to tell us that it's not okay. And again, it's going to tell us that we don't have those endings on the name. We know that when we started, Donald Duck Plumbing was INC period at the end of the name, and this name on the stationery does not have that. That's just another avenue to be able to go to court and say they're not acting like a company. Let's go to the next slide and see what we have to look at next. What about invoices? We all want to send invoices to our clients, right? That's the way we get paid. So let's look at Donald Duck's invoice. Think we've got another problem, same problem, right? The name's not correct on the invoice. So let's go through the next two slides. It's going to tell us that's not right. And again, it's because it doesn't have the ending on the name. The next one is about business cards. We get really, I guess, pretty selfish with our business cards. So like we've got Wile E. Coyote, Have Brain Will Travel, cute card, but what's missing on this one? It doesn't even have the name of the company. It doesn't have that he's an officer of the company. Who am I going to sue if Wile does a bad job for me and fails at doing something and I'm suing and I've got this card? Who am I going to sue? I'm suing him, right? That's the only person that's representing themselves as doing the work. So he's totally accepting personal liability by having a card like this. So if we go through the next two slides, it's going to tell us it's not okay. And it's going to tell us that it's missing the whole name and his position with the company. Next slide. Social media is a big one. So we've got Donald Duck Plumbing LLC. I know we started with Inc., but we switched. But finally, Donald Duck got it right. This can trip you up so much because social media, we're doing things fast. We're on these different websites, right? Like, what's happening in Lexington or what's happening in Charleston and all these different places. And you're recommending people for services or they're recommending you for services or you've just got your own page. You want to make sure, again, that your entire proper name is listed. It's that's easy for somebody to look at, right? Attorney on the other side starts looking you up and they look on social media and they're like, wait a minute, here's Donald Duck's Facebook page. Maybe he does or he doesn't have his full name listed. So it's just make sure that you're thinking of that. Email address, taglines, it's the same thing. You get an email from somebody and it has their name and, the name of a company. Make sure the name of the company is correct. It should be listed just as it's listed with the Secretary of State's office. Now, if I were attorney on the other side, I don't want to scare you too much, and I found one mistake you made, and I went waving that to the judge that I found one business card or one, they're going to say, Miss Raber, really? I mean, but if I said, look at their invoice, look at their business card, look at the way they're on social media, look at the wrap on their truck, look at, and if I found all these different examples, the court might be more inclined to say they're not acting like a company. I agree with you. So we don't want that to happen. We want our businesses to be protected. Next slide, please. So we're saying that one was right, but it's time out. Let's talk about what happens when you don't walk and talk like a duck. So if you don't have all those things, then you're exposing your personal assets to liability. So we can continue on. And we list some of the assets, like I'd like to have that car, your home, your car, your boat, your money, all of those things are exposed. If you have an interest in another business, that's exposed. So we want to wrap up our businesses tightly. So can anything else? I mean, we've gone through a lot, right? What documents we need to have in the beginning, what documents we need to have along, how we need to list our company, how we need to do our business cards. So what could go wrong now? Let's see. So let's say that there's another owner with you in your company, and they want to sell their share of your company to your largest competitor. Or if we could click on, it could be somebody you just don't like, your biggest enemy, somebody that you don't know, and you don't want to do business with. Can that happen? It absolutely can happen, but you can also prevent it. So how can you prevent it? You can prevent it, if we go on to the next slide, by including provisions in either your operating agreement or your articles of formation. So for an LLC, these provisions are included in your operating agreement. For new corporations, they're included in your articles of formation. And let's go to the next slide. If you're an existing company, it's not too late, because we're talking about new companies in that previous slide, but I don't want to scare you if you already have a company. We can amend the articles for a corporation, and we can amend the operating agreement for an LLC. So it's not too late. It can be fixed from this point forward. So let's talk about how we do that. So what these provisions say is that, and if we click on, it'll tell us, but what they're saying is you first have to offer before that other owner can offer the shares or his ownership to another person, he first has to offer it to the company. If the company says no, he has to offer it to the other owners on a pro rata basis. So if they own 50%, he has to offer it on that same basis to them. So only if they say no can he then sell it to somebody outside the company. And that is a powerful position. You may not think about it when you're first starting your company because you're not going into the marriage thinking about the divorce, but you really should. You should. Businesses, if you go into business with somebody else, it is a business marriage, and you do need to think about the divorce. I've had a client come in and this very thing happened. He and another owner went into a business together. They weren't getting along. The other owner is selling their interest in the company to somebody he doesn't even know. He's like, Kim, this will be devastating. Like, I don't know this person. I don't know their work ethic. I don't know their morals. I don't know their business plan. I don't know anything about, I don't know if this person's been arrested, has a criminal record. I don't know anything about them. And his operating agreement for his LLC did not include these restrictions. And so there was nothing he could do to prevent that. And that would be pretty scary, right? Is that because you went into business with the other person because you liked them, trusted them, knew them, but it would be scary to own your business with someone that you don't even know. So these provisions are very important. Another reason why you should have an attorney help you, even with an LLC that doesn't require it for formation. These are some of the reasons why it's so important, because it will make you think of other things to make sure you're protected all the way around. So let's go on to the next slide. We're finishing up about that's what, if they say no, then he can sell it. And why is that important? So let's go to the next slide. It's because, again, you can do business with the people that you trust and want to do business with. So next slide, we talk about what else can happen. So wonder if you're this business owner and you suffer from a stroke, have a car accident, develop dementia or Alzheimer's, or any other reason that can render you physically or mentally incapable of handling your own affairs. What happens to you? What happens to your business? So let's go to the next slide. Can you control what happens in this scenario? You absolutely can. And the next slide is going to tell us it's through estate planning. We now get into some estate planning documents that remember how we talked about those areas relate: business, LLCs, corporations, estate planning, contracts. So by signing a durable financial power of attorney, you can select who you want to step into your shoes and handle your financial matters for you. And that would include running your business. Next slide. If you don't have that, then the probate court has to appoint a conservator for you. And that, if we go to the next slide, is an expensive process. It takes time, it's expensive, and the person chosen by the court may or may not be the same person that you would have chosen. The court has to go by a priority statute. For instance, maybe the statute that the court's going to go by says that it's going to be your spouse has the first priority, but you would not want your spouse running the business. They just don't have that particular talent to run that business, that particular business acumen. Well, then you could have chosen that in your power of attorney, but if the court's choosing, they're going to choose based on that priority statute. Let's go to the next slide. We'll look at some comparisons of cost versus the financial power of attorney and the conservatorship process. And if we keep clicking through, it's going to show us. These are some of the standard filing and service fees related to that conservatorship proceeding. We can see that can be on the upward end of $3,750. The conservator may charge fees to serve as well. The financial power of attorney is typically about $150. So it's the one thing in life where it's the less expensive alternative, and it's the alternative where you have control. So it's a win-win situation to do that planning ahead of time. So what about death? We don't like to talk about this subject, but we've talked about if you become incapacitated. Wonder if you're the owner of your business and you die. So let's go to the next slide and talk about what would happen to your business. Let's go through some examples. So if you died without a will and you're married and have children, your spouse would inherit half and your children inherit the other half. So that would be your business too. That doesn't sound bad when we first hear it, but it's probably not what you would do if you made a will. You would probably leave it all to spouse. And let's go through the next slide, because wonder if your children aren't 18. So if they're not 18 years old in South Carolina, they couldn't even inherit what you're leaving them without that. Remember that conservatorship? Without that conservatorship being appointed. So now your spouse is running half your company and the conservators are running half of the company. Probably not, again, what you would have chosen. So let's talk about how we can make our own choices of what we want to happen in that. So again, we can control, but it's going to take proper planning again. And we're going back to estate planning and LLC planning. So let's talk about what we can do. Remember how we talked about you can have a carefully drawn will. So in that will, you're directing who's going to inherit your assets, including your business, and who will take care of your children's inheritance until they reach the age at which you decide they're capable of handling it. That's so important. And I'm going to divert for just a minute to talk about that, because remember how we talked about by law at 18, your children can inherit and can own property. Um, think about people that you know that are 18 and whether or not you would want to hand, $100,000 to them or $600,000 for your business. A lot of times, and there's exceptions to every rule, but a lot of times an 18-year-old is not going to have the maturity to handle that type of inheritance or run your business at that age. With a carefully drawn will, you can include a trust for your children. And in that trust, you can state what ages you would like them to inherit. So you can even divide it up. You can say at age 22, I want them to have a third. And at age 25, I want them to have half of the remainder. And at age 30, I want them to have the remainder. That way, it's spread out over time. So it's allowing them to mature and develop so that they can handle those funds. Next slide, please. So we've talked about your death, but let's say you have another owner. Remember, we talked about this before. If they wanted to sell, wonder if that other owner dies. We've had this happen all the time. Like, you trust that person, but you may not want to do business with their spouse. If you don't have restrictions that we're going to talk about, then the spouse, if that's who inherited under the will, they're going to be running half the company or whatever percentage that person had. So that's happened a lot too, is that all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, this person's not responsible. I never wanted to do business with this person. This is a horrible result. So can we prevent this from happening? Absolutely. And it's also, what about that scenario where it was half spouse, half minor children? Again, you're going to have those conservators for those minor children running the company. So how can we prevent this one from happening? We can do it again with the operating agreement, or if your corporation, the articles of incorporation. And we would include those provisions in there. They're called restrictions. And it's going to require the personal representative, which is like the executor of the estate of your other owner that passed away, to come to the company. And if we go to the next slide, they're going to offer the shares or the units for sale to the company. If the company says no, they're going to offer them to the other owners. And if both the company and the owners say they don't want them, then it can pass according to the will or intestacy laws if they don't have a will. The family's protected too. So think about your business owner, or if that were you, you're still protected because they're either going to get the interest in the company or they're going to get the value for it. So they're either going to get the interest or money. So they're protected, but it also protects you as the survivor, because you can choose to purchase those shares so that then you own 100% of the company and can continue to operate it in the manner that you want to. A good thing to do with that is that you and the other owner can purchase is what's called key man life insurance, where you have life insurance on each other and the company pays the premiums so that it's funded. Because again, it doesn't do you any good to have these restrictions if you can't afford to buy the person out. So that key man life insurance would provide the funds to do so. Most importantly, again, it's kind of our theme throughout this. It's you're in control. And I think you start businesses because you want to be in control. And these are ways that you can continue to be in control. Next slide, please. So in summary, we want to be in control of our own destinies through making sure our companies are properly formed, all those documents we talked about at the beginning, properly maintained, using the name correctly, having minutes of major transactions, and proper planning. Some of those estate planning techniques we talked about, where we're making sure we have durable financial powers of attorney and last will and testaments. So again, through all those steps, we are making sure that we are protected, because we don't want to grow these businesses and be highly successful and then lose it all or lose our other assets. So we want to make sure that we are protected and we always have that shield of armor up. Oh, thank y'all so much. And I'm glad to answer questions if that's proper for the format, or I'm not sure how our time is.
Thank you very much, Kim. That was great. A lot of really great information and again, on a really important topic. And yeah, I would like to open it up if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask related to this. And Sarah, should we do that through the chat?
Questions have to be done through the chat.
Okay.
Yes.
So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. What would you say, Kim, just to kind of as to give people a second to think about if they have any questions? What's the primary issue you would say that you see with your clients that are things that, you know, I mean, everything you talked about is important, but what's the one thing? I mean, if you could say, you know, one takeaway, make sure you do this above all else, what would that be?
I would say, Paul, to get that foundation right.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I see the most is because our state is not requiring an attorney to form LLCs, people aren't being told that that's not all they need to have. So it's no one's
Right.
fault.
Right.
And because you're not being told, you wouldn't know. And so we see again, you know, everybody says, "Oh, I have my LLC." And I'm like, "Do you have your your articles and
Right.
your EIN?" And they're like, "Yes."
Right.
But they don't have all those other documents. And I think that does leave you unprotected. So that's what we do a lot of, is saying, let's get your foundation first, and make sure that that's strong. You don't want to build a house on a bad foundation. And so I think getting the foundation secure first and then working up. And it can be done in layers too, because as small businesses, it's hard to do everything at first. It's
It
hard
is.
for an attorney to say, "Okay, you've been in business for 10 years. We need to go back to your foundation. We need to bring you forward. Your contracts need work. Your estate planning's not in place." I mean, that's a lot to take on. And so what we do is try to do it in groups and
Sure.
phases, so to speak.
Sure.
So
Sure.
getting the foundation is usually the first step, and then moving on to updating records for those major transactions, getting proper contracts in place, and then kind of ending with the estate planning piece of
Sure.
it is the way a lot of people will work.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, we have a lot of people that come to us and they say, okay, I've formed an LLC, so I'm in business. So, you know, let's get started. And I think, you know, one of the things that I advise people a lot is, you know, it really is, you know, we can help advise people in certain directions, but I also advise people that it really is worth spending the money at the beginning on a good attorney and a good accountant to make sure that, you know,
Yes.
you're setting those things up the right way from the beginning, because if you are, they can serve you for the life of your business. And if you don't, it can be fixed, but it's usually expensive and it usually is going to cost you some opportunity down the line. So
I think that's exactly right. I think it's always less expensive when you can do it correctly the first time than instead of having to go back and correct something. And I do think it's absolutely crucial to work with a team. You hit upon it, having a lawyer, having a CPA, having your commercial insurance, having your
Mhm.
payroll, I mean, it's all those components. And I guess a
That's
good way to
exactly right.
remember it is work in your flame and not melt in your wax. So if you're a
Yeah.
plumber, plumbing is your flame. That's what you know how to do. But if you start trying to do your taxes or do your legal work, or you start melting in your wax, and you can't be productive.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I met with a business last week that they're an auto repair business, and they're kind of struggling as far as, you know, because there have been some mistakes made as far as, you know, setting up the financials and all that kind of stuff, and even the ownership structure. But the reality is, you know, that's not what they got into the business to do. right? I mean, they got into the
Mhm.
business because they were good at something and, they wanted to provide a service to people, but you still have to, that's why it's important to get help, I think, from the beginning to make sure that you're doing that properly. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. One, is it okay to have a Nevada LLC when your business is located in South Carolina?
As long as you register that business in South Carolina. So all corporations or LLCs that are in other states, if you're doing business in South Carolina, you have to register that. They call it a foreign business. So a foreign corporation or a foreign LLC, you have to have that registered with the Secretary of State of South Carolina to do business in the state.
Okay. And I believe that registering your company as a foreign entity in South Carolina, I believe that's something you can do online through the Secretary of State's office. Is that right?
That's correct. And again, though, that would be something you would want a set of minutes for, because you're
Absolutely.
having a legal document that you're signing and
Yeah.
submitting to a
Yeah.
governmental entity. So that's one of the minutes.
Okay. If you're selling online, do you have to have a business license in each state?
That would be a state by state question. I think a lot of times what I've heard clients say is that as long as you have it where your business is located, that you're usually okay. But I think it's a good idea to check, because each state could have a different requirement on that if you're touching their state.
So for South Carolina, so let's say I'm basing it out of my home in Mount Pleasant, but I'm selling online. So if I have a business license for where my home is located, am I covered for South Carolina?
Yes, as far as
Okay.
business licenses are, it's just if you physically put yourself in another county, like
Sure.
we talked about the
Sure.
elevator inspector, if he goes into Charleston or Greenville,
Right.
um,
We've been getting a lot more questions about online because a lot more people are going that direction, I think, looking at doing that. And it
Right.
makes sense for a lot of things. And so, but it does get a little murky sometimes as far as, where do I actually need to have licenses and be registered so that I can stay legally good. You don't want the
Right.
IRS showing up at your door, or anybody else
No,
for that matter.
no.
So, and another question, do you have to hire a lawyer for a power of attorney?
You do not have to. I would certainly recommend that you do so, because again, I wouldn't know how to perform heart surgery. I might could look up a YouTube video on it, but I probably wouldn't. First of all, I would faint, but I wouldn't be too successful. So I think it's a good idea, because again, I see it from the other side sometimes where somebody's brought in a power of attorney that they've gotten offline, or online, and they are trying to, and they've signed that, and now the person's stuck with it because they don't have capacity to sign a new one, and it didn't allow some powers that they needed for some further planning, and it can't be changed. They're stuck with what they have. So I
Right.
think again, no, there's not a legal requirement. If you found a financial power of attorney and signed it correctly and properly, it could be enforceable, but whether or not it would contain what you needed it to contain would be another question.
Sure. Great. I got a question about what your fees are. I think, I mean, and I think just in general, I think what underlies that question is, so how much can I expect to spend to
Right.
really do these things properly?
With regard, if we fix the foundation, so if we prepare those documents to make sure that on the day you were formed, you have those documents like the operating agreement, the minutes, the transfer ledger, the unit certificates, the seal, then that fee is $850. If we update your company where we're bringing it forward from that date to current, and we're preparing minutes of those major transactions that have occurred, we do it based on time spent at the hourly rate of $225.
Great, thank you. Can you be a business under an LLC, but then DBA is something else?
I don't South Carolina doesn't recognize DBAs. I don't recommend it, and I'm so glad that this person asked this question because I forgot to mention that. But I say you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. If you drop the basket, all the eggs may break. And it's the same thing. Remember how we talked about liability protection? Well, if you put 16 properties in one LLC or 2 businesses in one LLC and the LLC gets sued, then how much do you stand to lose? You're going to lose everything in the LLC, or you could. But if you had each of those in separate LLCs and one got sued and got hit, you still have the other LLC going. So
Right.
it's a separation of liability. You hear people, I think a lot of people hear buzzwords like umbrella. Can I form an umbrella company? And
Right.
and of course I know everybody's wanting to save money and all, but I just think it's a bad idea, because then you could stand, again, you drop the basket, you lose all the eggs. And it's the same philosophy. As the company gets sued, you stand to lose everything.
So put everything under a separate LLC
Yes.
is kind of the big takeaway there.
Or what you stand to lose. Like people
Sure.
will, buy investment property and they'll say, okay, I'm going to take the risk and put 2 properties in one, because I agree. Both of them are valued at, 300,000 total. So I'll take that hit, and some people will do each one separately. Goodness, I had somebody that came in the 16 properties in one LLC recently, and I'm like, that is a nightmare. You could lose everything, because that was millions of dollars of property.
Right.
And yes, we all have insurance, and certainly we hope insurance will be our first line of defense, but insurance claims are not always totally successful. They may not cover something, they may not cover it entirely. So you certainly want to have this other line of defense available.
And I think one of the reasons a lot of people do that, or they think about going in that direction as far as putting a bunch of stuff under one LLC or a holding company or something, is because of some potential tax implications, which is another reason why I think it's good, from early on in your business to have an attorney, have an accountant, and have them talk to each other, in addition to
Mhm.
you, to make sure that you're organizing all these things in a way that makes the most sense, both legally and financially.
Exactly. And working
Um,
with someone like Deltrice is wonderful, because
that's
it's,
exactly right.
looking at it saying, okay, legally we can do this, but it may not necessarily be in your best interest from a tax standpoint. So
Right,
it takes both. It's that
right.
team approach
It's that team
again.
approach, exactly.
Mhm.
When you record your minutes as a sole proprietor, do you suggest keeping a log of your individual business transactions? Will this suffice?
Well, there's one wrong thing in there, because we don't want a sole proprietor, because sole proprietor means you're not an entity. So you may have meant like a single member LLC or a single owner corporation, but a sole proprietor, that term means that you're not an entity. You're just doing business in your own name. You may have a name of a company, but it's not formed under the Secretary of State as an entity. So you certainly want an entity. If you're a sole proprietor, there's not a requirement that you have minutes. With a legal entity like an LLC or a corporation, you do need minutes, and they should be recorded. Again, it depends. LLCs, it's those major transactions. It's the organizational and major transactions. You're not required to have annual minutes. Corporations can differ depending on the type of corporation.
Okay, great. Couple more. Do you help with the trademark process also?
I do not. I don't do the intellectual property rights, but we do refer. We have attorneys that do that. There are not many in the state, actually, but we have several that we refer to for that. And that's
Great.
something too, that if you do own intellectual property, that should be in a separate LLC, because you don't want
Yeah,
to have that owned by your operating company. Because again, if it's sued, they can take everything.
right. And we for anyone here in Charleston, in the Charleston area that might be on here, we have someone here as well, an attorney that we work with a lot on trademark stuff. But yes, absolutely. So would you recommend Rocket Lawyer for legal documents such as staffing contracts?
No. No.
Not to give a short
I'm
answer, but no.
No. Remember that red screen in the PowerPoint presentation? I said no. Just because I've seen a lot of my clients' documents where they've used one of the online services, and it is a lot of times they'll say, yes, I have this contract or I have this operating agreement. I'm like, oh, great, bring it in, let me see it. And it's blank. It hasn't been completed for the business. It's just a blank form. It's
Right.
not signed, it's not completed, and often it's not state specific. They'll send you the form, and then they usually have a little clause that says, if you need a form that's, according to your state law, let us know and we'll refer you to an attorney. So that's typically, so I've looked at those just to see along, and that's what I've typically found, is that they're not filled out. Typically, the client hasn't signed them, and they're often not specific to our state's laws.
And we have a number of people that come to us who go through LegalZoom to do certain things, and it seems like they spend a lot of money on that in some cases for things that could be better handled by actually working with someone locally. My 2 cents.
It is expensive. It is expensive. And also they usually try to talk you into being your registered agent so that they can charge you annually a fee for that service as well.
Yeah, because you can be your own registered agent, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, so
That's
there's
correct.
no reason to pay, because basically what that is just where anything is going to be sent, right? Any kind of legal correspondence or anything like that. So you don't have to pay somebody to do that for you.
That's exactly right.
Can I have other businesses under my one LLC?
You can have, but you shouldn't have.
Right.
There's nothing that prevents you from doing it, but from a liability issue, it would be better to spread your risk. And so I always recommend that my clients have an LLC for each different type of business. Because again, if one business gets sued and they get a judgment and they take what that business has, if you've separated them out, you still have another business going under a different LLC.
Okay.
Okay, great. So do we want to move forward with our presentation, and we can open it up for questions at the end if we have anyone else with remaining questions? I just want to
Absolutely.
make sure we are keeping on time.
Sure. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for answering all of those questions, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I am going to turn it over to Deltrice Hart Anderson, and she is going to give you kind of the other side of the coin, which is, making sure that you're staying on top of your accounting and financial aspects of your business. So Deltrice, thank you for joining us today, and I will turn it over to you. And it looks like you're still muted.
All right, can you hear me?
There
now?
you go. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. I am tech challenged myself. Okay, I'm about to share my screen and you guys let me know what you can see. Does that
We
look
can
like-
see it. Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So thank you guys so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to get in front of fellow small business owners. And I'm turning this volume up just to make sure that you can hear me. I am Deltrice Hart Anderson of D Hart Accounting, where we keep the IRS out of the pocketbooks, wallets, and bank accounts of taxpayers. So, and bear with me, I promise I'll get my rhythm as far as, there we go. So just a little bit about me. I have, I'm all things tax, right? All things accounting and tax. I have a bachelor's in tax in accounting, a master's in taxation. I've worked in all these Fortune 500 companies in the accounting and tax departments. I love real estate. So I'm a serial real estate investor. I am an IRS enrolled agent. And before anyone asks, no, I do not work for the IRS. I have a license to represent taxpayers when, and that's businesses or individuals when they're in tax trouble. So I am not the man. I help you solve problems when the man comes after you, you and or your business. I consult with attorneys, or I should say attorneys, CPAs, and other tax professionals. They seek my help, especially when they have clients in tax trouble. I love teaching accounting and tax courses when I can. Obviously, I present with SBA, IRS, and SBDC on tax and accounting topics. I am a proud Goldman Sachs alum of their 10,000 Small Business Program. I am also a board member of the South Carolina Board of Accountancy. So I say all of that. That's just my resume, but guess what? It means absolutely nothing. I don't know how long you guys have been in business, but I'm an entrepreneur just like you. So I have my ups, my downs. I have to keep up with legal stuff. So I consult with attorneys because, yeah, I don't do that stuff. I don't know how to do that stuff. It makes me nervous. So I have a team around me that help me do the things that I don't know how to do. I don't want to know how to do. I can't do because that's not my profession. But because I just want to do the work, right? I just want to be the entrepreneur that I hung my shingle and said, hey, I want to do accounting and tax work, and I don't want to do anything else. So I'm an entrepreneur just like you. Whatever you went into business for, that's your thing. And that's all I am. So it's nothing special. The alphabet soup behind my name means nothing. And I wanted to say that. So if you have any questions, or when you have questions, just ask, because I'm just plain old Deltrice. Okay. All right. So how I serve, and if I'm going too fast, I'm going to look in the chat periodically. Please feel free to ask questions. If you have any, I'll look over from time to time. So how I serve, I like to tell people I keep the IRS out of your pocketbooks, wallets, and bank accounts. That's just what I do, whether it's through tax preparation, through tax planning strategies, or whether it's actually representing you before the IRS when you get the nasty gram from the IRS for you or your business, or if you have filed all your tax returns and can't afford to pay the IRS. So we help you with strategy. So however that looks, that's what we do at DeHart Accounting. So I want to talk to you today about just 6 accounting and tax essentials. And for every business, whether you're this big business, or if you're a small business, if you're a growing business, wherever you are in your business journey, there are 6 accounting and tax essentials to get you financially ready and to keep you financially ready. Okay. So why these essentials? So it could be a lot of reasons, but I want to go over just a few reasons that you want to have these essentials. Okay. So the first is people need money to be in business. You may need a loan. And if this pandemic hasn't taught us anything, when the PPP loans came out and when the EIDL loans came out, we had to be ready, right? We had to show, I'm going to go back to this first. We needed money. And if we could not get a regular loan, we needed to show something, right? To show, hey, we are a true business. We can operate. This is not a hobby. This is not something that we're thinking about doing. We are in business. And so if you could not prove to SBA, to the banks, that you were an actual business, then you had to fall back on a loan, right? So if you were not financially fit, you had no evidence that you could repay a loan. So it's essential that you always, wherever you are in your business, you want to stay financially fit. You want to stay ready when it comes to if you need money from a bank. Okay. You always need to paint that best picture. You need to show that your business is living its best life. And even if your business isn't living its best life at the time, you want to show where, hey, my business may not be living its best life right now, but here are my projections. And my projections are based off of history. So I'm not living the best life now. My business is not, but we will be, with this loan, we are going to be living our best life in short order in the near future, right? And you want to paint that picture because you want the best terms. You don't want to have interest rates at 20%. You want a 3%. Well, I don't know if you could get 3% anymore with the interest rates going up, but you want to get that 5% or 6% business loan, the interest rate, right? You don't want to have to get those higher interest rates loans. Now, another reason why it's key to have these essentials, just like Attorney Raber just talked about, lawsuits. If you have your business set up, if your business looks financially correct, right? You have everything structured properly from a legal standpoint, then you are likely not to get sued yourself. It will be the business getting sued, right? So you have to set yourself up to look like a business at all times from a financial standpoint. And what I call it is the carpet has to match the drapes, right? So I know some of you are going to think of that in a different way, but what I'm saying is you have to look like a business from a legal, not only from a legal standpoint, but from a financial standpoint, okay? This is all that I mean with the carpets has to match the drapes. All right. Another reason why these specific essentials is because if you go after a contract, I don't care whether it's a government contract or whether it's a private sector contract, you want to be taken seriously. And guess what? Businesses that are serious about their business, they have their finances in order, okay? I didn't say they had to keep up with their own books. They had to do their own tax returns. Both of those I would not even advise, but you have to have these things done. You have to look serious in the eyes of the government and even the private sector. You may start looking at a contract with a fellow business that does similar services, or where you guys see where you can become affiliates. And they may say, hey, I need to see your financials. I need to make sure that you have some longevity, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for businesses that they can do business with, that they know will be around. So financial strength will equal longevity. Okay. And then here's some things, and I hate social media. I really hate. They do a really poor job, and it scares me. And there's not a week that goes by where I don't get phone calls from different prospects just calling. I had one yesterday coming back from Charleston, and one of the questions that the new business owner said had for me is, hey, I need to pay myself. I was told that I need to start paying myself. So I was like, why do you need to start paying yourself? Okay. And they're like, well, that's what someone told me. I saw this YouTube video or TikTok or whatever it was. And they said, I need to pay myself. I want tax savings. Okay. So you can't go to someone and just throw that out there. That's like saying on the first date, as soon as you guys sit down, that's like your date saying, kiss me. And you're like, what? Wait a minute. I can't kiss you. We just met. We haven't had, the waiter hasn't come to the table to take our drink orders. You just can't thrust those questions in, and you want tax savings. And that's the goal, to save as much on taxes as you possibly can. And these are the questions that people first start asking. Can I hire my kid? Can I hire my spouse? Can I pay myself? Can I get paid to travel? What can I write off? Well, that's just it. I don't know yet, because if you don't have your financial life in order, then it's hard to answer those questions. It's not even hard. It's impossible to answer those questions. Okay. So that's why we're going to talk about these 6 essentials to get financially ready and stay financially ready. Okay. Number 1, simplest thing to do, keep that federal identification number letter, right? When you go on the IRS's website, and this is a sample of it, it's a CP 575. When you go and sign up, you're getting ready to go in business and you get that federal ID number, you need to keep this letter, because there are a lot of questions that you're going to ask your accountant or your business consultant or your tax strategist about how to save money, or how should we file a tax return. This letter alone, you keep on hand. You may need it for the banks. You may need it for a government contract as well. This letter is going to tell you what tax return you need to file. Tax return, or sometimes tax returns, depending on what questions and how you answered questions when you got your federal ID number. And federal ID number is the same as employer identification number, by the way. Okay. The next is know your business structure, okay, for tax purposes. Everybody, if I ask, I think it's a little over 20 people here right now. If I asked 100 people, what is your business structure? Guess what everyone is going to say? Someone just put it in the chat. If I ask, what's your business structure? And this is no judgment. And maybe you don't want to do it now because you may say, exactly, thank you. I'm not going to call your names. Thank you. Everyone is going to say LLC. And you're right, partially, because yes, you may have formed an LLC, but that is not your business structure for tax purposes, okay? Here's the thing. LLC is that first step, but you are LLC taxed as what? So remember when I said keep up with this form, because you may not be able to see it. I'm just going to circle around. This is Form 1065. That is how we can determine as accounting and tax professionals what your tax structure is, okay? Awesome. So sole proprietor, that's right. So that is a tax structure. So sole proprietor, also known as single member LLC. But you could be an S Corp, you could be a partnership, a C Corp, you could even be a nonprofit. Those are tax structures or business structures for tax purposes, however you want to call it. That's going to determine what tax form is required of you from the IRS. Okay. Another one, the third one we talk about is keeping your business and personal bank accounts separate. All right. I'm sorry about that. Fat fingers. The reason for this, so mind you, I spend 85 to 90% of my time on the phone with the Internal Revenue Service and departments of revenue, South Carolina, North Carolina, Maryland, you name it, the California Franchise Board, all across the country. I spend time with departments of revenue and the IRS getting taxpayers out of tax trouble. My business owners, when there are commingling of funds, when you do not separate your business and your personal bank accounts, if you just had a business tax issue and the IRS sees Netflix and Amazon and all of the your local grocery store, when they see all of those expenses in your business account, guess what? You have opened up a huge can of worms. Now you have allowed, you just gave the IRS an invitation into your personal bank account, into your personal affairs, into your personal tax account, and you don't want those problems. So it's bad enough that the IRS is snooping in your business affairs. Now, because you have mixed and mingled funds, now they're in your personal bank account. Another thing, it doesn't even have to be the IRS. If a bank is looking to lend you money and now they may look at your bank account, right? They're going to say, ooh, we don't, or they could say, I'm not going to say all the time, because I've seen some banks that will allow you to just go and separate the two. But some banks may automatically disqualify you and say, this business owner is not acting like a business. They're mixing and mingling those business transactions with personal transactions. We don't know if we want to do business with that person. We don't know if we can trust them with a loan. Okay, so you definitely want to keep them separate. And those are just two reasons. Another reason I can share with you, if you have a bookkeeper, you don't want your bookkeeper or your accountant having to go through and separate the business and personal transactions. One, you're going to have to pay more money for that. And two, you don't want them in your personal business. So those are things that you want to consider. But from a legal standpoint, keeping the business and personal is just from legal, IRS, and from banking or lending potential, you just want to keep those separate. Okay. Essential number 4, know your numbers. Okay. So let's look at this puzzle. And all financials are tax and accounting. They're puzzle pieces. Okay. You have everything starts off with receipts and bank statements and credit card statements, right? And all of those transactions, they're going to trickle down into some sort of bookkeeping, right? And so all those transactions get melted down into bookkeeping. And from the bookkeeping, your accountant, your tax strategist, your business consultant, whoever you're dealing with, they can create and interpret the financial statements for you. And financial statements will help you not only get a loan if you need it, show the government that you know what you're doing because you know your numbers, but you can make, as the CEO of your company, as the manager of your company, you can make better financial decisions. You can make financial decisions because you have the numbers. You are not flying by the seat of your pants. And then those financial statements eventually trickle down to your tax return. So if you know your numbers, then all of the magic, all of these puzzle pieces, they start to happen for you easily. Okay. And number 6, you want to seek help early. It is less expensive to seek help. Get your tips, get them from a credible person, okay? I tell people all the time, you want to make sure and have someone credentialed. I don't care what that credential is, but get someone with something to lose. When let's see, I have a question here. When it comes to that, is it wiser to set up separate shopping accounts like a Walmart account? I asked this because I have a personal Walmart account, but when I buy something for my business, I use my business bank card. Yes, you absolutely want to use your business account to purchase business items. And if you could get a Walmart card or a Walmart account for your business to use separately, please do that. I also have known people to tell me, well, it's easier for me to get personal credit than business credit cards. If you are in that situation, then if you use your Walmart personal account, use it for nothing else but business. So that will be helpful as well. Please let me know if that answered your question. And if not, I can expound. Okay, awesome. You're quite welcome. My pleasure. All right. So back to seeking the help early. You want to seek help from professionals, okay? Someone with something to lose. Stop listening to stop listening to the people out in these social media streets that's telling you you can do this, that, and the other. They don't know what you can do because they have not seen your financials. They don't know your business structure. They've never seen your balance sheet. They've never seen your financial statements. Okay, they haven't seen your budget. They know nothing of you, right? So everything sounds so nice and sweet and, oh, I can do this, that, and the other out in these social media streets, but you certainly want to seek professional help early. Any assistance that SBDC can provide, assistance from Attorney Raber, assistance from, and it doesn't have to be Deltrice at DeHart Accounting, but if you're going to get your taxes prepared, get your taxes prepared by one of two professionals. Either you want to get a CPA is fine, okay? People know the CPA, but a CPA or an enrolled agent can prepare your tax returns. Now, you can also there are other professionals that have what's called an annual filing season. They're annual filing season preparers. They're fine as well. But when it comes to tax strategies and tax planning, you want to get someone with credentials behind their names. And definitely if you are in tax trouble, I mean, if your business is in tax trouble, if you are personally in tax trouble, meaning you get these letters from the IRS, or if you you have filed your return, but you can't afford to pay, there are only 3 professionals in the world on this earth that can assist you, that can represent you before the Internal Revenue Service. Those are attorneys, CPAs, and enrolled agents, such as myself. So just make sure you're going to seek help early, but seek the help from the right people. Okay. And no questions. All right. Now, here are some people that you can seek help from. A bookkeeper. You don't necessarily need a CPA to do your books. Okay. 9 times out of 10, and you don't need an enrolled agent to do it. 9 times out of 10, I know what I do. I have a bookkeeper that I partner with. And if we can't do the books, if our team has too much bookwork to do and someone comes to us with a bookkeeping project, we send them to a bookkeeper, someone that does that, right? So you don't necessarily need the CPA to do that. Same thing with tax preparation, which I shared with you a few seconds ago. Tax strategist or a tax planner. Again, you want to get the person that is professional that can do that type of work. A business consultant. Now, business consultants don't necessarily have credentials, but look for someone experienced, okay? And just remember, every CPA does not do tax preparation. I have CPAs that consult with me all the time. They say, hey, I got a client with a tax problem. Please, I'm going to send them your way. And they send them my way. I clean them all up and send them right back to their CPA for whatever the CPA was doing for them. Okay. So remember, when you're seeking that help, just ask the person, you know, what are your experience? What's your credentials? And anyone that has experience or credentials, they should not be offended. Okay. Now, when it comes to bookkeepers and tax preparers, they're reporting history, okay? Old news, that's what they're doing. They are reporting your income, they're reporting your expenses, they're preparing a tax return, sales tax, income tax, payroll tax, whatever it is, right? But when you talk about seeking help from a tax planner or a tax strategist, or I like to call myself a tax debt strategist, because when I'm helping people get out of tax trouble, we have to plan for the tax debt and strategize to minimize that debt as much as possible, and then help them stay out of tax trouble afterwards. So these planners, these strategists, these business consultants, okay, and a business consultant, by the way, can also be an attorney. They're helping you write your business future. They're setting you up for future success, okay? So you have your consultants or your team that will just write your history for you. And then you'll have other members of your team that will help you write your future. All right, this could be for a business loan, any projections, expansions, you just want to bid, you want to make sure and get with a strategist, a consultant, whatever you want to call them, because different people call themselves different things. So whatever it is, that's what you want to seek help with, okay? If you're investing in a business, you're partnering with someone, you're selling your business or thinking about selling your business, you want to get with some of these people. Also, minimizing taxes, because that's the thing. Hey, I want to hire my kids. I want to hire my spouse, right? What can I write off? These things you want to get with someone, seek early. Don't wait until April 14th and the taxes are due the next day. You're not going to get a person for that, okay? Let me go ahead and answer another question. Since I got laid off, my business has been my only income source. How can I keep up with personal expenses without hurting my business funding? So I'm not sure. So I'm going to answer that. But if I don't answer it correctly, then could you please ask me some follow-up questions if you don't mind? So if you're in your business is your only income source, what you want to do, you still want to keep your business bank account separate from your personal bank account. Now, depending on your business structure is going to determine how you pay yourself. And depending on your business structure and depending on how you are set up within your business, whether you are an owner as well as on payroll, then that's going to determine how you take money from your business to transfer to your personal account. Okay. Did that answer your question? Did that answer how to keep up with your personal expenses without hurting?
Also, if I could add in here, I'd just like to say that, that's something that we can help with as well on the SBDC side, is helping you with organization and keeping track of things and all that. So remember us as business consultants as a potential there as well.
Okay, great. Did everyone get that? Awesome. Thank you, Paul. All right. Now, here's an idea when it comes to keeping up with your finances, right? Creating that financial system. Remember this puzzle piece right here? So you want to create something as simplistic as possible. You don't need it to be all elaborate. Just a bunch of accounts, a bunch of lines on a financial statement. It doesn't have to be that way. You want to create your bookkeeping system around whatever tax form you're required to file. So if you're filing as a single member LLC on a Schedule C, look at the categories on the tax return and set your bookkeeping system up around those categories. If you are a partnership, do the same thing. Just look at, I'm sorry, guys, look at the tax form that you have to file, and that's how you want to set up your bookkeeping system. So it could be simple, because remember, let's go back this way, that bookkeeping is going to end up being financial statements, which ends up going on the tax return. All right. And lastly, you want to keep your taxes current. Remember, I see a lot. This is what I do day in, day out. I help negotiate tax problems. I help people and their businesses when something has gone wrong. Sometimes it's because they did not keep up with their tax filing, or because they could not or did not pay for whatever reason. And it doesn't matter in the eyes of the IRS, whether the taxpayer had the money to pay and didn't, or whether the taxpayer didn't have the money to pay and didn't pay. It's all the same with the IRS. And the IRS is aggressive. I know you guys have probably heard about the Inflation Reduction Act, where the IRS is going to get that 87,000 people, right? And just FYI, it's not going to be 87,000 people come January of 2023. That's over a 10-year period. But just think, it's better to solve your tax problems now before they start bringing those people on board. One, because these people will be new to the agency, so they're not going to have the experience. They're going to have to work up to the experience, so they may not know the tax laws. That's where people like us come in. We can help you navigate the tax laws, because just to be perfectly honest, sometimes we have to, when we're negotiating with revenue officers or revenue agents with the IRS, we have to say, hey, no, this is what the law says, because sometimes they may not know it. So you want to, if you have any tax issues, you want to get those out of the way before the IRS really ramps up, okay? And what does that look like? You want to pay your estimated taxes if you do have to pay estimated taxes. Make sure and file your tax returns, all of them, payroll, sales, income tax returns on time. You need to know what the IRS has on you. And what do I mean by that? You can go to the IRS's website and you can pull a transcript yourself. Now, you may not know what that transcript means. That's where hiring a professional to help you determine figure it out, what is the IRS saying that they have on you. but you need to know where to go, where you can pull the information that the IRS has on you. And you also need to know your rights and know your options when it comes to resolving any tax issues that you have, whether it's with the IRS, whether it's with the South Carolina Department of Revenue, whether it's with South Carolina SCD, Department of Employment and Workforce, okay? If you do have tax issues, you need to get into a properly structured installment agreement. When you do that, and I say properly structured, then the IRS leaves you alone, okay? If you can't get into that installment agreement, then you need to know your options, and the IRS needs to know why. And again, seek help when you are trying to figure that piece out, when you're trying to seek out tax relief. Another thing, if you are in tax trouble, make sure not to accumulate more debt, because the IRS frowns upon that. Then they're going to want to dip into your pocketbook, your wallet, your bank account. And again, you don't want those problems. And you want to tell the IRS, if you are in tax trouble, hey, leave me alone. Stop any collection activities, stop wage garnishment, stop bank levies, just leave me alone. But you have to get to that point, okay? Another thing, reduce your tax, your debts by reducing any penalties when possible, okay? Anytime you didn't file on time or you didn't pay on time, you're gonna have some penalties. And I don't know, because I'm a tax nerd, of course, I follow this stuff. But for your 2019, 2020 filing, the IRS, if you did not file your tax return, and if you owe them money, the IRS is now automatically waiving certain penalties. So that's nice of them, right? But it's not that way all the time. So you definitely want, if you need to take advantage of this, it's nothing you have to do. But if you have a tax return that you haven't filed yet, you have until September 23rd to file that return to get this automatic relief. I'm going to take another question. What is typically the cost for tax strategy and filings, or is it vastly different based upon the business itself? That is correct. It is different for different businesses, whether you are an S corporation, depending on the number of shareholders you may have, whether you are a partnership, depending on how many partners you have. If you are a single member LLC, is it just that one business? How many businesses you have different single member LLCs or Schedule Cs on your personal tax return? What other things you have on your tax return? Do you have real estate? Did you sell crypto? Did you sell other securities like stocks? Okay, so it just all depends. And another factor is, are your books in order, so that all that professional has to do is your tax preparation? So it's vastly different. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if I answered your question. Another thing with tax, oh, you're quite welcome. Another thing with tax relief is you want to make sure and get any liens removed when possible. In the state of South Carolina, if you have a lien, and this is actually all states, if you have a lien registered at the county, if you're trying to sell property, guess what? You're not going to be able to sell that property, because the IRS has placed a lien at the county level where that property is located. You want to get extensions of time to pay when they are available for you, and then utilize that time to gather your documents to make sure that you timely file. And again, I cannot stress, seek professional help. You may be able to do your own personal tax return. You do not want to do your own business tax return unless you're in the business. If we have some accountants out here that do their own return, that makes sense. But I can tell you now, I have clients that are CFOs at hospitals. I have clients that are CPAs, but they're CPAs in corporate America. They don't do tax prep. I have them as clients of my own personally. So you want to seek professional help with the right professional. All right, that's all I have. Here's my information. I think you probably have it in your slides. Let's stay in touch. If not, you can take a picture of it. I'll stay on the slide for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that's some more YouTube. If you have immediate issues, the best way to reach out to me is at the very bottom at www.callthetaxpro.com. You can schedule a time to chat with me, no charge. Just let me know what's going on, and I can see if I can point you in the right direction to get you on the right track.
Great.
And just want to let you know, guys, it's hump day. So happy Wednesday. I hope there was something that I said that some little nugget that you could take away to help you with getting or staying financially ready. Take care.
Great. Thank you, Deltrice. Excellent, excellent information. Does anybody, I know you answered several questions going through. Does anybody else have any questions that they'd like to throw into the chat box? And I guess to kind of get us started, I'll ask you the same question I asked Kim, which is kind of, what's your one big takeaway from this? You know, if you had to give one piece of advice for people based on what you most commonly see, what would that be?
So what I commonly see is people waiting, business owners waiting until January to get stuff done, to get their books in order. They want to know what can they do to save on taxes. That tax planning should be done at least twice a year. For some, it can be quarterly. Some clients will do it quarterly, but at least twice a year. Mid-year, so right after you get your taxes prepared for the previous year, mid-year, and then right before, I wouldn't wait until December, but maybe October, November. That way you don't get the tax surprise come April 15th. So that's the biggest thing. Just start getting your financials ready soon.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other questions? You really can. I mean, from our experience of a lot of the clients that we work with, and again, I said it before, but just to emphasize, I mean, really staying on top of these things means that when you get into a situation where you need financing, you know, we saw it a lot with the COVID relief stuff. When you need those kinds of things, you have all of that available, and you don't have to scramble around trying to put something together that you haven't been doing as you've been going along. So, and I'll also emphasize again that idea of having a team. So, you know, have an attorney, have an accountant, have an SBDC advisor, have all of these people to help you do this. So. Well, thank you very much, and I will turn it back over to Rebecca.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Deltrice and Kim, for spending a couple hours with us. Your presentations were very informative. Thank you for taking questions. We had some wonderful questions today and some wonderful answers. I just want to give one more shout out to our podcast for our Bridge program. Our podcast was launched recently, and it accompanies these training sessions. We have these training sessions through the end of September into October, and we have a new podcast episode airing every week on our podcast. You can actually access that on our website if you go to www.scsbdc.com/thebridge. You can also register to receive no-cost counseling sessions with one of our consultants. And what we can't help you with, which we are very comprehensive. We have partners like Kim and Deltrice who also help us out with that. So we really appreciate the collaboration today. And if you have any specific questions, you can reach out to me or to Antoine Gleaton. He has also been running the back end today on this webinar. And I have our information on the screen right now. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll wrap it up for today, and I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. Thank you.